Imagine taking a really delicate ancient Japanese bonsai tree, right? And just trying to plant it in the dark, heavy soil of a classic German forest.
You'd probably expect it to just wither and die immediately.
Right, because the climates are completely different. I mean, the root systems of those two languages shouldn't even interact.
No, not at all. But, in the mid-20th century, German poets didn't just plant the haiku. They actually mutated it into this uniquely European literary weapon.
And the way that transplantation happened is just, it's one of the strangest literary detective stories we have.
Yeah, the haiku didn't just survive the translation into German. It became a vessel for a whole society trying to process totalitarianism, total physical destruction, and then eventually, like postmodern pop culture.
Which is exactly our mission for you on this deep dive. We're cracking open a massive stack of literary history to track this assimilation of the Japanese haiku into the German language.
Mostly focusing on that post-World War II founding phase, right?
Exactly. Looking at how this rigid, mathematical, 17-syllable foreign structure gave German writers a totally new way to think. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Sounds good.
Before we get to the post-war boom, we kind of have to look at the first seeds. Like, how did a Japanese poetic form even wind up on a German writing desk in the first place?
Well, the initial path was actually pretty circuitous. It arrived mostly through French translations in the early 20th century.
Oh, through French. Okay.
Yeah, and writers like Paul Ernst were, experimenting with the form as early as 1898. But the real spark, the moment it really caught the attention of the German literary establishment that came from Rainer Maria Rilke in 1920.
Right, Rilke,
Yeah,
who is obviously this towering figure in European poetry.
absolutely.
And reading his letters from that time, specifically to his friend Gudi Nolke, you can just hear how captivated he is.
Oh, yeah, he was obsessed.
He marvels at this, and I love the phrasing he uses here. He calls it this indescribably mature and pure form. He was so into it, he actually started attempting to write them himself.
He did, yeah. Though, structurally, we kind of have to look at Rilke's attempts as very loose approximations.
Because he wasn't doing the math, right?
Right, he wasn't counting syllables. He wasn't adhering to that strict 575 metric grid at all. He was really just trying to capture the emotional essence, that fleeting observation of nature, rather than the mechanical discipline.
There is one he wrote about moths that really illustrates that. He wrote, small moths stagger shuddering across from the boxwood. They die tonight and will never know that it was not spring.
It's beautiful.
It really is. It has that quiet melancholy, that sharp observation of a tiny, doomed creature. But like looking at the page, it's much longer and wordier than any traditional haiku,
Yeah, because of the language barrier. I mean, if we want to find the actual bedrock for the German haiku, we have to jump from Rilke's loose experiments ahead to 1939.
which is a pretty intense year.
Very. But that year is the true catalyst. A sinologist named Anna von Rothtauscher published a translation anthology called Ihr gelben Chrysanthemen, which translates to You Yellow Chrysanthemums.
And we really have to pause here to look at the historical context, because 1939 in Germany is a very specific, obviously very dark era.
Yeah, the context is everything here.
Right. And just to impartially report on what our sources tell us, Rothascher's publication became deeply intertwined with a cultural phenomenon known as the literature of inner emigration.
Which is a framing that's crucial for understanding everything that follows.
Right.
So during the totalitarian regime of that era, there was this group of conservative, often deeply Christian authors who remained inside the country, but they withdrew from it mentally and artistically.
Like they refused to engage with the oppressive society around them.
Exactly. They used nature poetry as a quiet retreat.
So when Rothhauscher translates these Japanese poems, she is feeding them directly into the specific cultural hunger.
Spot on. She actively styled the great Japanese master Basho as a poet monk. She presented him as this solitary figure who was completely at one with nature, just turning his back on worldly chaos.
Wow. Okay, so for these German writers, the haiku wasn't read as just like a cute poem about a frog or a falling leaf.
No, not at all. It was a method to quietly oppose totalitarianism through an intense focus on the intact world of nature. It was, a retreat to preserve the soul.
So it's like she used the haiku as a literary Trojan horse.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Like it looks like a simple poem about a leaf, but it's actually a vehicle for maintaining inner freedom during a dictatorship.
Exactly, preserving inner freedom. And because that was the lens through which German writers first really studied the haiku, it permanently colored their understanding of it.
Right. It got instantly associated with a spiritual, naturalistic refuge from human chaos.
Yeah. So because of that framing, when we arrive at the post-WWII founding phase, which is roughly 1953 to 1962, the poets picking up the pen in the rubble of a destroyed Germany, they saw this form as a survival mechanism.
Because they're grappling with immense physical and psychological trauma.
Exactly. But there was a massive linguistic problem with the Rothauscher translations they were using as their guide.
Oh, right. The syllable counts were all over the
Yeah.
place.
Japanese haiku rely on anan, which are phonetic units, usually translated as syllables in the West. It's a strict 5-7-5 count. But Rothauscher's German translations ranged anywhere from 9 to 28 syllables.
Which honestly makes total sense when you think about the mechanics of the German language. I mean, it is notorious for massive compound words and heavy consonant clusters.
Oh, absolutely.
If you try to translate a concept that takes 3 sounds in Japanese, it might take a, 12-letter, 4-syllable word in German.
The friction between the two languages is just immense. So because of that translation variance, the first post-war German poets imitating her didn't write strict haikus.
They basically wrote German short poems in 3 lines.
Right. They borrowed the brevity, but not the mathematical discipline.
And Karl Kleinschmidt is a prime example of this phase, right?
Yeah, he published a collection in 1953 called Der Schmalweg, or The Narrow Path.
And he basically takes this 3-line form and pours traditional German Christian love poetry straight into it.
He takes the Japanese technique of evoking a single image, but the payload is entirely European. There's a poem of his about a scarecrow that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh yeah, the final version reads, "A scarecrow points me the way to heaven."
It's an incredibly profound 3 lines.
It really is. You have this lowly, everyday object, the straw scarecrow in a field contrasted with the ultimate Christian concept of transcendence.
Yeah, but looking at the underlying mechanism, it feels like it's missing something, doesn't it?
It's missing the tension of a true Japanese haiku.
Exactly. It lacks the mathematical boundary. And that brings us to 1962 and the aesthetic breakthrough of an Austrian writer named Imma von Bodmershoff.
This is the turning point.
Yeah, this is the moment the autonomous German haiku is born. Bodmershoff actually started out just like Kleinschmidt, writing those looser, longer 3-line poems.
Right, until she has a total epiphany about the math. She goes on record saying she used to think 19 or 21 syllables were perfectly fine for a German poem. But she ultimately realized that, and this is a quote, "In the number 17 is a power contained that can be replaced by nothing else."
And she actually went back through her own portfolio and actively stripped away the excess syllables. She forced her earlier works into the classic 5-7-5 structure.
It's like a pressure cooker.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, if you leave the lid loose with 21 syllables, the steam escapes. You get a nice little observation about a scarecrow, but there's no intensity.
Right.
But when you lock it down to exactly 17 syllables, the pressure builds. The language is forced to condense, and the ingredients undergo a total transformation.
And Bodmershoff's mastery of that pressure cooker is astounding. Let's look at the mechanics of one of her most famous works.
Let's do it.
It goes, "The candle goes out. How loudly the cricket calls in the dark garden."
Ugh, it literally gives you chills. But I want to understand how she's achieving that within the German language.
Okay, so in traditional Japanese haiku, there are 2 vital mechanical concepts. The first is kirigi, which translates to the cutting word. It's a structural pause or break in the poem.
Okay, then the second.
The second is yoin, which is the reverberation or the emotional after echo. And Bodmershoff executes both perfectly using German syntax.
The candle goes out, boom, dash. It functions like a cinematic jump cut.
Yes. That dash is the German equivalent of the kirigi. She sets a scene and then immediately cuts the film. But look at the cultural imagery she's using.
The burning candle.
Right. A burning candle is a deeply European, often Christian symbol. It represents light, life, intellect, divine presence. When it goes out, we are instantly plunged into darkness and the void.
But the void isn't empty.
No.
Yeah.
What rushes in to fill the space left by the extinguished European light? The call of the cricket in the dark garden.
Nature.
Nature, exactly, the Zen spirit. And the yoin, that reverberation, is the imaginary sound of that cricket echoing in the reader's mind, long after the 17 syllables are over.
Wow. So she proved that a 17-syllable German haiku wasn't just possible, it was potent. She fused European symbolism with Zen mechanics.
She did.
But wait, If Bodmershoff so definitively proved that sticking to 17 syllables creates a masterpiece, why did that spark a decades-long argument? I mean, wouldn't every German poet just adopt her standard and move on?
You would think so.
Hmm.
But it actually ignited one of the fiercest literary debates of the era.
Really?
Yeah, by setting the 575 gold standard, she forced the entire poetry community to ask, does a Japanese mathematical structure even make sense in the German language?
Oh, I see.
And it all came to a head in 1979 at an event called the Bottrop Haiku Biennale.
I just love the visual of this. A gathering of the most prominent haiku poets from across West Germany, all in one room in Bottrop, just arguing passionately over the syllable count of a frog jumping into a pond.
It was intense. The records from that gathering show the room fractured into 3 distinct camps.
Okay, break them down for us.
First, you had the partial camp, led by figures like Peter Carolus. They argued that trying to imitate the Japanese structure was pointless.
So what did they want?
To them, a German haiku should just be a poetic aphorism. Keep it short, keep the central image, but throw the syllable counting out the window because it restricts German expression.
That's the just let the steam out argument.
Exactly. Then you had the content-only camp, championed by Harold K. Holzman. He took an ideological stance.
How so?
He argued that imposing strict fundamental rules is a purely European habit. He said trying to dictate a fundamental way to write a haiku was fundamentally un-Asian.
Interesting.
Yeah, he believed the spiritual intent was everything and the form was entirely irrelevant.
Okay, so you have one group saying the form is too restrictive and another saying the form is culturally inappropriate. Who is actually defending Bodmershoff's 17 syllables?
That was the middle group.
Yeah.
The form and content camp, represented by poets like Sibylle Sommerkamp and Hans Stielett.
Yeah.
They fought back hard. And they didn't just use literary tradition as their defense.
No.
They brought in human biology.
Oh, this is where the debate gets genuinely fascinating.
Right. They argued that 17 syllables corresponds perfectly to the length of a single human breath. It's a biological imperative.
Wow.
Whether you're speaking Japanese in the 17th century or German in the 20th century, human lung capacity is a universal constant.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, so the 17 syllables isn't some arbitrary grid imposed by a foreign culture. It's the natural rhythm of human respiration.
I want you, listening right now, to actually test this. Take a normal breath in and then speak out a sentence of exactly 17 syllables as you exhale.
It fits perfectly.
It does. You don't have to gasp for air and you don't have an abundance of breath left over. It is the precise length of a spoken human thought.
And Hans Stielett used this to reframe the entire concept of the pressure cooker. What's fascinating here is how he argued that for a great artist, a formal limitation isn't a prison.
It's an aesthetic stimulus.
Exactly. Forcing your thoughts into the length of a single breath forces you to make incredibly hard choices about what words matter. It prevents the artwork from, as he put it, melting away. It keeps the edges sharp.
So form isn't the enemy of spirit. Form is the architecture that allows the spirit to stand up.
Precisely.
And once that architecture was firmly established in Germany, it basically became a playground.
Oh, absolutely.
By the 1980s, the haiku wasn't just for nature-loving conservatives writing about crickets and scarecrows anymore. It was completely hijacked by the avant-garde.
Yeah, we see a hard transition into postmodern assimilation. We're moving from Basho's Zen monastery straight into 1980s pop art.
And the definitive text here is Uli Becker's 1983 collection, Fräulein Butterfly.
Right. He takes this ancient meditative 17-syllable breath, and he just shoves pop culture, pornography, cinema, and modern urban chaos right into it.
There is this one haiku he wrote paying homage to the film director Alfred Hitchcock that completely subverts the tradition.
Yes. It translates to, don't close an eye tonight because of all the birds, homage Hitchcock.
Which is wild because traditional haiku almost always features birds as a symbol of seasonal change, right? Delicate natural beauty.
Exactly.
Becker takes the classic haiku trope of the bird and turns it into the terrifying threat from a Hollywood horror movie.
It's so clever. But the wild part is, even while he's dragging the form into postmodern cinema, he is still playing by one of the oldest, most sacred rules of the haiku.
The kigo.
The kigo, yeah, the season word. Every traditional Japanese haiku must contain a word that instantly anchors the poem in a specific time of year. Cherry blossoms for spring, cicadas for summer.
But a major hurdle for the assimilation was that German poets couldn't just import Japanese season words.
Right, the climates and the cultural touchstones are totally different.
Oh.
So they had to invent their own geographic Kigo.
They had to localize the seasons to the German experience, and our sources show how creative this got.
Yeah, instead of cherry blossoms, a German haiku might use Martinsgans, the Martin's goose, which is traditionally eaten in November.
So if a German reader sees Martinsgans in a poem, they instantly feel a damp, chilly autumn evening.
Exactly. They also use Furschnee, which refers to that specific hard, crusty old spring snow you find up in the Alps. Or they'll use the mechanical roar of a tractor harvesting the fields to anchor a poem in late summer.
And Uli Becker even updated the season word for the indoor postmodern age, didn't he?
He did. He wrote a haiku where the setting revolves around the refrigerator.
Oh, a nod to William Carlos Williams.
Yes, his famous American poem about eating the cold plums from the icebox. By using the refrigerator as his Kigo, Becker creates a modern artificial winter inside a glowing kitchen. It just shows how incredibly flexible the container of the haiku really is.
Let's pull all these threads together. We started with Rilke in 1920, gazing at French translations and writing loose, multi-syllable lines about moths.
Right.
Then we moved through the inner emigration of 1939, where the haiku was a secret psychological garden to survive a dictatorship. We saw Bodmershoff strip away the excess language to find the jump-cut power of exactly 17 syllables.
Which sparked that national debate about human lung capacity.
Right. And then we ended up in the 1980s localizing the seasons without snow and refrigerators.
And, the underlying principle connects all of them. Whether it was the inner emigration authors escaping tyranny or postmodernists like Becker, they adopted a strict foreign vessel.
But not to mimic Japan.
No. They did it to execute uniquely German literary projects. They poured their own national trauma, their own landscapes, and their own cultural history into that 17-syllable mold.
It proves that a poetic form isn't just a set of arbitrary rules. It's really a technology for organizing human thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And it raises a fascinating question about how we communicate today. We look back at these mid-century poets and marvel at how forcing their sprawling, chaotic thoughts into an alien 17-syllable grid stripped away their cliches.
It forced them to find the absolute core of what they wanted to say.
Yeah, the limitation wasn't a prison, it was a clarifying filter.
Which makes you wonder about the constraints we face now. If the strict boundaries of a Japanese haiku could force German writers to invent entirely new ways to express their trauma in their modern world, what foreign limitations could we voluntarily apply to our own modern digital communications?
Exactly. We live in an era of infinite character counts, unending threads, and sprawling voice notes. We have zero friction when we speak.
Too much freedom? Maybe.
Maybe. But what if we applied the pressure cooker to our own daily communication? If you had to restrict your next important message to the length of a single human breath, what excess would you have to cut away, and what truth would actually remain?
A 17-syllable text message might just save us all a lot of time. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for those cherry blossoms in the Black Forest, and we'll catch you next time.